Welcome to Viewpoints, brought to you by Acquature, the leading provider of public safety software and training. My name is Sherry Bartram, and I will be your host today. A little bit about us before we get started. We are an international leader in public safety training and technology, with products geared toward providing tools to help responders stay safe and educated. For those of you who are new to us, we offer monthly podcasts with a variety of guests geared toward public safety topics, as well as monthly webinars and a diverse offering of training courses. Today on our show, we are talking with Tony Harrison. He is the founder of the Public Safety Group. Tony has over 25 years of experience in communications, working in small PSAPs and major metropolitan PSAPs. He's also served as a reserve deputy sheriff for more than 20 years, retiring at the rank of captain. This gave him a really unique perspective to what both sides of the radio are experiencing during calls for service. Tony has served as state chapter president for APCO and NENA and has been and continues to be involved in numerous committees at a national level. And then in 1994, he looked at everything going around and he incorporated his company to become training public safety professionals. Tony, we're really happy to have you here with us today.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Today we're gonna talk about the importance of training. In May of 2022, the National 911 program, which runs under NHTSA, the National Highway Training Safety Administration, released a toolkit to establish or expand the public safety telecommunicator training program. In the United States, all but 7 states have some type of requirement for dispatch training. Tony founded his company with the belief that training is paramount and has grown to serve public safety nationwide following that philosophy. So I want to delve a little bit deeper, Tony, into your thoughts and what continues to drive you to serve public safety in this way.
Yeah, when you talk about the 911 National Project Office and their 911 training guidelines, and I guess there's some talk about changing them from guidelines to requirements or standards. We have seen a tremendous amount of change in the past 10, 15 years with just a handful of states having some type of training requirement to now a majority of the states. But, it's so many of these states, it's such a minimum requirement. It's the standard is so low that, we do have a lot to work yet to be done. A lot of work has been done, but we still got a long way coming to really get us to where we need to be.
I agree with that. And with your background, I've always said, so I served in EMS for several years and I was on the fire department. And I always said it really gave me a unique perspective to be on both sides of the mic. So you had that, but really what inspired you to start a training company after being in the PSAP?
Yeah, and I kind of fell into it. It wasn't necessarily a deliberate action, but there was some training that needed to be done around the state of Oklahoma, where I was from, and I was still working in the PSAP. So, it was just an easy way to be able to provide a little tiny bit of training that the state needed from time to time. And it kind of expanded from there. I was on duty during the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building, which we're coming up on the 29th anniversary just in a couple of weeks when we're recording this. And I did a lot of teaching around the country in the aftermath of that about the bombing and the city's response to it. And then there started to become questions from some of the people I met about doing other training classes that were not specifically related to the bombing. And so I started doing some other training courses for a few clients here and there. And, I continued working in the PSAP and just basically on my days off, would go out and do training and with for a few clients, and that just slowly grew over a number of years I then started taking it and doing it full time, and have been doing that now full time for a couple decades now. So sometimes it wasn't necessarily something I planned out, but it was kind of more of a path that found me over time.
Um, I'm just going to go a little sidetrack here. The Oklahoma bombing, you said you were working that day. I've attended several seminars and classes surrounding that situation. And one of the ones I attended, they were talking about how well everybody did because they had just had training on how to respond to that. Um, can you speak any bit to that? I just really want people to understand how
Yeah.
important that kind of training really is.
We had always done a little bit of training, but a year prior, about 11 months prior, 10 months prior, the city had been selected by FEMA to attend an integrated emergency management course at FEMA headquarters in Emmitsburg, Maryland. And it was a city-specific training course. So the entire course was specific to the city of Oklahoma City, and the city actually sent 60 employees from the police, fire, EMS, Red Cross, all aspects of disaster response to Emmitsburg for a week. It was all paid for by the federal government. We were even mandated by FEMA to travel on separate airplanes because they did not want 60 city leaders and public safety responders if that plane were to go down. We had the police chief on board, we had the fire department, the fire chief on board. So there were all kinds of stipulations about how to travel. But we did in the police department, we did a lot of preparation prior to this training. Our chief of police at the time had gone to the same training when he was a deputy chief at the Dallas Police Department. And he told us, all of those that were selected to go, and we had everybody from dispatchers to supervisors to, like I said, the police chief and fire chief and city manager. He said, they made us look like idiots when I was there at Dallas. So he told us, this is what's going to happen. This is what they're going to do. You need to prepare and train and get ready. So we did some preparedness and training prior to the incident. And then the week we spent there was extremely educational. A lot of lessons were learned, and some of the things we wanted to do in the aftermath had not been done prior to the Murrah building. But the training, the experience, the connections that we made paid huge dividends. And the training, they actually set up an F5 tornado. The big drill that they do was an F5 tornado devastating Oklahoma City. And that's not what happened. But I came up with this theory of what I call the transferability of training. And I've taught it for many years now, is, because there's so many times when I'm out on the road training, especially if we're talking about active shooters or disasters or terrorism, you quite often hear, well, you can't train for that. You can't prepare for that. And that's wrong. It is absolutely 100% wrong. You can train. You can prepare. Now, is it going to be exactly the same that you drew up? No, it's not. We trained for an F5 tornado. That's not what the first major disaster was that hit us. There wasn't one that hit us in 1999. But the Murrah building was several years before. But the training and preparation we did for tornadoes is transferable to the incident that did occur. So the lessons we learned from the case studies that we did in Emmitsburg, the training we did in preparation for going, the training we did afterwards, was transferable to the incident that did hit us. So, this is one of the reasons why I become so passionate about training and the importance of training, is we're going to rise to the level of our training. And we saw it that day. You rise to the level of your preparedness. And if you're not prepared, if you're not trained, you end up having to wing it. And that's when we see a lot of the issues that we see in disaster responses, even today.
Right. Right. We won't go into those, but yeah, there's recent ones.
Yeah,
Um,
and you know, I've read after action reports for the last 30 years, and lessons that were in after action reports 20, 25 years ago. I still see in after action reports this year, last year, year before last. We know the lessons, but we are failing to implement them because so many agencies have this belief that it won't happen here, whether it's an active shooter, a tornado, or whatever. They just fail to plan. They fail to train.
yeah. Oh gosh. I'm kind of speechless, which is not a good place for me to be, but um, I I've felt that so many times in my career. Um, you fail to train, you're not prepared. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
Um,
you know, if you look at the recent report issued by the U.S. Department of Justice on the Uvalde shooting, the acting chief of police for the city of Uvalde had no incident command training, had no active assailant training. The acting chief of police had no incident command training uh, when that incident happened. I mean, and it's 2024, and it's mind boggling. But you know, we see this all over the country. Is you know, we don't train dispatchers, we don't train you know, up and down the deal. But here we are begging to be classified as first responders, but you know, so many times, you know, and you all see it at Equiture as well. When you try to tell people to train and the importance of training, uh, you know, well, we don't have the budget. We, you know, and so many things like this. You know, it's a free webinar. It's a free podcast, and you know, we still can't get people to take part.
right. I was I had a good friend. He was a chief, and he used to say, "All right, that's a terrible." He'd tell this to the city council all the time. That's a terrible way to look at it. So how many zeros are we going to put at the end of the check? Because we're going to pay now or we're going to pay later, but we're going to pay. And what you just said that's just perfect. That goes right along with that.
You know,
Um,
if you want to delve into liability issues, you know, I used to get a phone call every 12, 18 months about a lawsuit. You know, an attorney looking for somebody. Um, Last November, I got 3 phone calls in 1 month.
Different cases.
All different cases. And all of them very specific to 911. And for the first time, one of them was an attorney that the incident had happened. He hasn't filed the lawsuit yet, but was planning on filing a lawsuit. But he wanted to talk to an expert even before he filed the lawsuit to make sure all of his ducks were in a row. So when he went after the city, he'd be ready to go.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did that put you in an awkward position, or did you just give your
No,
expert opinion?
I will admit it. He retained me as an expert witness for this case. And I used to be very reluctant to jump on plaintiff cases. You know, I would only do defense of 911 centers. But anymore, you know, people aren't listening, and if the only way to get them to listen is to get them to start writing those checks, um, then maybe we need to. You know, so yeah, I have, and I'm very specific in the cases I choose um, to where I'll be a plaintiff's expert witness, but um, you know, it's out there, and you know, um, one of the first things you know he did even before he hired me was get hold of the training records of the dispatcher involved. I mean, that's the first thing they, you know, through open records or through FOIA request or whatever, they're going to look at your training records. And, you know, is your agency going to turn over a folder of 3 pieces of paper or are they going to turn over a folder of 30, you know? Um,
Right.
It's going to happen. This stuff is out there. Our industry is changing fast. And I know a lot of centers are short staffed, and it's hard to get to give somebody a day off to attend an 8-hour class. But there's so much training out there, not only through Equiture, but you know, the public safety group, and we can list them on and on and on, that you can do at your console. There's so much of the stuff that Heather and others at Equiture have been working on for many, many years now that, range from 8 hours to, 20, 30 minutes, you
Right.
know?
Right. And, the big pushback, and I know we're a little off topic here, but the big pushback that I hear from centers is, well, we really like to just have people go out and see how good they have it here. I mean, I've heard that for years. Um, and
Yeah.
that's great.
It would be great to get them out for 8 hours. But if you're 20, 30, 40, 50% short staffed already, you can't do it. So, then, you're going to have to bring training that they can do while on duty. And that's what a lot of centers miss. And I am a full proponent of in-person classes. Um, However, COVID has taught us that good quality training can be done virtually. Do all people learn as well virtually as they do in person? No. Do some people learn better? I was doing a class, I think it was about a year and a half ago, and it was an area where they required the student to have the camera on, which I'm a big fan of if we're doing a virtual class. Um, and the student was laying in bed. And
Uh,
if you would have told me 3-4 years ago, I would have been said, no way. But this person was one of the most active participants in class. They kept their camera on. They asked questions. They asked good questions. They paid attention. And when I said something to the person told me, well, this is how I finished college last year.
wow.
You
That's
know,
pretty
so
funny.
yeah, I mean, and I have found it almost better in virtual trainings for them to be at home taking it rather than at work. Because if they're sitting at the office at work, there's a very big chance they're going to be checking emails. People are going to come into the office, interrupt them. If they're at the office, I was teaching a virtual class yesterday, and someone was supposed to be able to just take the class, but they were short, so they were called into the comm center and was trying to take calls and sit in the virtual class as well. So it's it's a different world, and we have to be ready to move to this uh, new version of training, to be able to take a 20-minute class at your console at work, or an 8-hour class that all you need to do is hit pause if you get interrupted, and it's broken down to 20, 30-minute segments. Um, that's the future.
Yeah. What do you enjoy most about training?
I enjoy the travel. I enjoy seeing different places, different comm centers. Some places you go, you're like, these people, and depending upon the class I'm teaching, sometimes I get doing a customer service class, and most of the time I get called to do a customer service class. It's like preaching to the choir. It's the people that show up for the customer service class that really don't need the customer service class. The people that need it are not the ones attending. But sometimes I really enjoy having the burned out, disgruntled dispatcher in class, that it can be very beneficial. And I'm not offended that they're burned out, or, I had somebody once in class, you do your introductions, what's your name, how long you've been dispatching. And they said, I've been dispatching 15 years and you don't need to know my name because you won't remember it anyway. And people actually gasp in class. Their coworkers actually gasp in class. And I said, okay. And we moved on to the next person. Um, and I know why I was there. I know why this person had an attitude to a certain extent. Obviously, they had some issues before they came into the class. But, now, I can spend the next, 4 hours, 8 hours, however long the class is, teaching and, maybe getting them to a better spot than when they came in. And in actuality, at the end of the class, when I was walking out, they met me in the parking lot and apologized. And we talked for a few minutes about other issues and stuff like that. Um, I wasn't mad. I mean, it serves me no good to get mad at this person. It serves them certainly no good. They would probably like it if I did get mad or offended, you know?
Then they'd have a good excuse not to listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So you've talked with the Oklahoma bombing and that training that you had, and just the ongoing training in person or virtual. In a perfect world, if we could have a perfect world, how often do you feel public safety personnel should have continuing education? So
Yeah.
I'm talking about continuing education. New employees
Yeah.
are different.
Yeah. And you're right. We do a pretty good job of training our new employees. But once they get released, it's like good luck and training's done with. And my belief is I would like to get training in every single person's hands at least once a month. Something in their hands once a month. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something, an hour, something that they can read. And these days, it's the attention span of, especially a lot of our younger dispatchers, reading's probably not going to be the best way to reach them. But, video content, something. Can we get some type of training in everybody's hands every single month? And sometimes it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a formal class where, they go online, sign into Xriture and watch a video or do something like that. That is certainly nice, certainly very good. But sometimes training can be very informal as well. There's always incidences happening in the news media that we can sit down around a table and train. There was a recent incident not too far from where I live of swatting, and what a perfect opportunity to, hey, how could we as dispatchers have recognized this incident as a possible swatting and de-escalate it as much as possible? And it's a situation where a person called and said there's people stabbed in the house, and it sounds like a very traditional swatting type call. But, do we know the telltale signs of swatting? And then when we do dispatch on it, but we let the responders know that, this thing has all the telltale signs of a swatting incident. It came in on our non-emergency line. There was one call. The person really wasn't responsive to dispatcher questions. All these telltale signings. It tells us that, hey, we're dealing with a potential bogus call. And there's been a number of these incidences that have resulted in people getting shot by police by accident or, in one case, police officers arriving in the middle of the night, banging on a door, and a homeowner shot one of the police officers thinking it was someone trying to break into their house. So, going back to answer the specific question, regularly, every month, we need to be training on something in some way as much as we can.
And I really agree with, putting something in their hands. When I would teach new dispatchers, I would always tell them, you might get out of training. You might be all done training. You might be released from training. Don't let it stop. You have a obligation to yourself to go find training, do scenario training. If you can't do scenario training with someone who's been there for 10, 15, 20 years, then do it with somebody new, because I guarantee you, if you start doing scenario training on, different kind of calls for service, it's going to help you. And I had one student, and all the times I've said that, this one student really stood out, because she started saying, well, I don't think, we just have a small agency. Why would I need to know about a shooting. Why would I need to know about, and it was
Yeah.
classic, all those things you said. It's never going to happen here. So it gave me an opportunity to talk to her in front of the class. I mean, she asked the question in front of the class so that everybody could really hear and understand it's going to happen at some point
Yeah.
in time.
The first agency I started working at when I was 18 years old, it was 2.5 square miles. It was the most affluent community in the state of Oklahoma. They hadn't had a homicide there in years. Right after I left that agency, a firefighter that I know was killed in line of duty responding to a house fire. They'd never had a firefighter killed in a line of duty. A couple of years after that, they actually had a homicide, first homicide in the city in decades. Yeah, it doesn't matter, where we work. But, so many people do. And hats off to that trainee that had the courage to ask the question. Um, and I loved your, because I've said it too, is the agency has a responsibility to train me. There's no doubt about that. But I also have that responsibility to seek it out. Who's going to be the butt in the chair? So your agency may not
Right.
be doing everything they should, but that doesn't alleviate your responsibility to seek out that training and to go find it and be a part of it as well.
Right. And I know, I know you agree with me. So for our audience, um, people signed up to be in 911 because they wanted to make a difference, because they wanted to help people, because they enjoyed the idea of public safety work. So you're going to want to do the best you can. And when the agencies don't provide that training, there's all kinds of material right in the comm center that can help you do those trainings.
Yeah, and even if they didn't sign up to help somebody, maybe they just needed a job.
Oh,
I've come
that's true.
across many dispatchers that Tony, I just needed a job, or I'm a single parent, I need benefits. I'm here for a paycheck. Well, that's fine, but like you said, when the phone rings, you want to do the best you can. No matter why you're in the chair, you want to do the best. And you may not be able to go and pay for training, but like you said, there's so many things out there today that you can just go and get. Talk to each other. That's free.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about training new employees? How do you feel new employees would best benefit from a solid training program? You said most of us do a pretty good job training our new employees.
I think a foundation is everything. The foundation of my house. The house sits on the foundation, and if I can train people very well in the basics of call taking, they can take any type of call they want. Any type of call. If you train in the fundamentals, who, what, where, when, why, and how, and people learn those very well, they can take any type of call that comes down the pike. And one of the things I sometimes hear about protocol dispatching is it reduces the amount of time training. And there can be some truth to that, but I think it's a danger to think that if I employ someone's protocols, I don't need to train you as much as if you don't have protocols. Protocols are great, and some of the companies have done, tremendous jobs on their protocols. But, we get some very strange situations that don't fit neatly into a protocol. There's a recent call from here in the Carolinas of a military pilot ejecting from his plane and landing by parachute in someone's backyard. And the homeowner calls 911, and the dispatcher is kind of at a loss. And it almost sounds like, they're dealing with the call as a fall. And she asks, well, how far did they fall? Well, 1,000 feet. It just what the person's calling is, I've got a fighter pilot in my backyard who ejected from his plane that was going to crash. And if I ask one of the experts in these protocols, they'll tell you which protocol to turn to. But if it's a rank and file dispatcher that's just had a couple days training and doesn't know the protocols as well as someone else does, they're not going to know exactly which protocol to use. And some of them are so scared to deviate from the protocol because they think they're going to get sued. You run into issues. But if I have strong training in the background of that, then the person knows. I was at an agency recently, and one of the radio dispatchers was talking about, they've employed the protocols, but some of the call takers are having difficulty asking follow-up clarification questions to clarify the call. So they're getting the questions asked, and this was a suicidal person, a check the welfare, because someone got a message from somebody that they thought, the police needed to go check the welfare. And the call taker never asked, what did the message say? They followed the protocol and asked all the questions that the protocol had for them to ask, but didn't know to ask the follow-up question of, hey, this message that you got from this person you're concerned about, what exactly did it say? And we got to have that foundational training to be able to, even if we employ protocols, to be able to do that. And even if we don't employ protocols, we don't get to select the person who answers the call. Is it a 20-year veteran who's highly motivated, highly trained, or is it somebody 20 days out of training? We don't get to select which one is going to answer that call. So, a good example is Denise Amber Lee. One of her calls when she got her kidnapper's phone before she was killed, she called 911. It reached an agency in South Florida. It reached a fairly new dispatcher, and that fairly new dispatcher had some difficulty processing that call. She wasn't prepared this soon out of training to answer a call from a woman who's kidnapped and trying to hide the fact that she's on the phone with 911 from the person who's kidnapped her and been raping her for the previous 3 hours. And when I teach about that class, I tell people, you don't get to select who answers this call. And if you can't trust one of your new people to answer this call, is there a problem in your training program?
Right. Well, those examples you gave, I mean, they're perfect when you take that all the way back to the Oklahoma City. Your agency, your whole city had trained for a F5 tornado. You hadn't trained for a bombing.
Right.
But people have to be able to take what they know and transfer it to another situation. And I think sometimes that's really hard for people, especially if they are not aware that that's what they might have to do. I think if they're prepared with that solid base that you were talking about, that's what they might have to do, I think it helps them more.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So I talked when I introduced you about, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Over the years, a variety of committees and different boards, and I know that was one of my favorite things in my career, is being able to do all of that. With all of the variety of committees you were involved in, did you have favorites?
There's been a couple of favorites along the way. Those of us who've been around a long time, APCO used to have project series, Project 33, Project this. Yeah. And I served on the project that looked at 311. Back in the day when President Clinton, and this dates me a little bit, President Clinton talked about a nationwide 311 system to relieve some of the call volume issues around 911. And we actually did a pretty comprehensive study and issued a pretty comprehensive report about ideas around 311 back in the day, and that was very, very enjoyable. I served on some of APCO's Homeland Security Task Force post 9/11. And certainly always enjoyed that. A couple of the committees I really, the awards committee, I always enjoyed doing that. I did that for several years. But the awards committee at APCO has become, it's a huge committee now because they review all of the nominations for all of the APCO International Awards. And it's a lot of work because you got to read every one and listen to the audios depending upon which awards that you've signed up for. And I've done that for some states as well. And I've always enjoyed it doing it for states as well. So, those have been some of my favorite committees over the years. I don't do as much committee work these days. I've got a 14-year-old at home and trying to run a business and being, married and everything else. It's hard to, commit, and some of these committees take a lot of time, as some of you all know, to commit that time. It has to come from somewhere, and they're volunteer committees, so you're certainly not getting paid for it. So I've kind of stepped back from most of my committee work with APCO and NINA these days, but I heavily encourage people to get involved at the state level. Get on a committee, learn about your committees. When you're ready, look at some of the national committees, APCO or NINA. It's really rewarding work to do. And one of the things that has almost been probably just as beneficial is the contacts that I've made. I don't know everything, but I know enough people now in this industry that if I don't know something, I probably have a pretty good idea who I can reach out to by email or text and say, hey, what about this? What do you know about this? Who do you know? And sometimes people reach out to me and I tell them I don't know, but I'll put you into contact with somebody who knows more than I do. And I'm happy to, hey, you need to call so-and-so and make the connection between two people and two agencies, and let them talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. The contacts are good, nice to have also along with the committees. Do you feel like beyond the training that you might have received in the PSAP, do you feel like those committees and boards helped you develop yourself so that in turn that enhanced what you gave back in your training?
Oh, so much. When I was on the 311 project, and we were about 3-4 months into it or 2 months into it, and the local news media got hold of it and asked our chief of police, and of course it trickled down to the major, to the captain, and the captain was well aware of the committee I was on, so the captain then came to me, and the chief was able to say, well, yeah, matter of fact, one of our people is on this national committee to study this. So it is enhanced me tremendously. The knowledge that I've been able to gain from people who are smarter than me. And even still today, I was at a conference not too long ago, and I was talking to a comm center manager from out west. She runs a very good comm center, fully staffed, today fully staffed, a pretty good size comm center that's fully staffed. And I was talking to her, and one of the things she told me is, Tony, we have to find a way to say yes. And I asked for some examples, and she said, so many times as managers and supervisors and directors, people, line level people come to us and ask a question, and so many times the answer is no, we can't do that. And she says, we have to change that to find a way to tell people yes. And she gave me a couple of examples, and it was amazing work that she was doing in her center, and she had turned so many things on their head. helping people with special accommodations that they need for shift schedules or time off or days off. And she says, we have some mandatory overtime, but she said, I had a young man come to me that, he'd gotten to the point where because of, getting called in, his friends had stopped asking him to come join them when they were going out on the weekends or doing things. The invitations stopped coming because they couldn't count on him. And he says, I don't mind working overtime. I don't mind being mandated in. I just want my days off to be days off. And they were found a way to accommodate so he could plan days off. If he needed to work 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours on a scheduled day, he had no problem with that. All he wanted was his days off to say days off. And they found a way to accommodate that because this young man was looking at resigning and going to work somewhere else. And in so many centers, the automatic answer is no. No, we can't do that. Everybody has to do that. And then this good quality employee, good quality dispatcher becomes disgruntled or leaves, and then we got one more position open. And this director was like, no, every time we have a chance to tell somebody yes, we tell them yes, and we find a way to tell them yes. And I asked, is someone abusing it? Because there's always got to be someone that's abusing it. She goes, no, everybody's doing what they need to do.
Well, that's good for her.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I've used that philosophy before, and I had a dispatcher ask me, well, I think that we need to change the hold sound that the citizens hear when we have to put them on hold. And I said, oh, to what? And he says, well, to staying alive. Like, oh, come on. we can't do that. That would be a no.
Yeah, I would probably, staying alive. It's a great idea. I love the person's humor. But I've seen centers where they got elevator music, and that's probably not a good idea either.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, so we've talked a lot about when people are hired, and some of them say they want to help others. Some of them, make a difference. And some of them just need, the paycheck. But no matter where they are, what type of training, education, exposure would you encourage them to obtain? Committees just to help them grow. I'm a firm believer that you should not only grow in your career, but you should grow in yourself. So when you're seeking that education, seek it for yourself too. What would you say?
Yeah, the training, you seek out your training, seek out free training opportunities you can find through webinars. And there's all, one of the benefits of COVID and everything else is there's a lot of free webinars out there. So seek out, a lot of these webinars are recorded. So, okay, you work the midnight shift, you can get the recording and watch it as you can, on the midnight shift, try to attend your state conferences. Some of the best training I ever got was at some of the small state conferences. If you can't afford to go to a state conference, they're begging for people to volunteer. Can you volunteer at your state conference? Can you volunteer for one of the national conferences? APCO, NENA, they're always needing volunteers at the national conferences. You volunteer for 4 hours, you typically get the next day free or something along those lines. There are ways, if your agency doesn't, there's scholarships out there. The Be the Difference conference through the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. There was a half a dozen or more scholarships that paid your entire way to that great conference. They'll have scholarships for it next year. APCO, NENA has various scholarships that pay your way to attend those national conferences. Committee work, seek it out. See what local state committees are in need of help. And don't sell yourself short. So many times people are like, well, I can't do that. I'm just the dispatcher. I work the midnight shift. I can't do that. Yeah, you can. Your knowledge, whether it's a small town, whether it's a large town, is still vitally important. And if you don't share it, somebody else doesn't have it. That becomes the key. There are people that can use your knowledge, people out there that can use what you have to offer, and so many, whatever your talents are, this industry needs them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Um, so I just have one last question for you. Your training company kind of just evolved naturally over the years. Um, and I've known some other people who have successful training companies, and at some point they've just decided, they really do just want to retire. What about your long-term career goals or plans? What do you want to do when you're not training?
Yeah, I am working on that exit strategy, because, I do travel a tremendous amount of time. It takes away time from my family. My son, this is all he's ever known his entire life. That's all my wife has ever known, is me, being on the road. But there is, at some point in time, I do want to scale back. I think part of the future of training is content creation. Much like Netflix, the creation of content that can be reused in many ways. I think there are ways to continue to produce content for many years, and then that content stays around for many years after. But I've taught a class at some, I haven't taught it in a while, called Your Fingerprint, but it's mostly talking about a fingerprint a CTO leaves on their trainees. I am a creation of many trainers that I've had over my entire career, and I can name many of them off the top of my head, but their fingerprint is on me. And the training I do, hopefully I impact people, and I leave my fingerprint on them. And then they will go train others in time. Some of them may not train. But the people that they train now have my fingerprint on them, and it's almost second generation. The fingerprint fades over time, fades over each generation, but it's still there. So in some way, I do leave a living legacy. I remember one of the first paid professional training classes I went to back 40 years ago, 35 years ago. A guy named Dennis Bruns had created a training company, and he was out doing dispatcher training classes, and there was only one or two companies that were doing it at that time. And, he's long since passed away. But, his legacy is kind of living on in subsequent generations of the people that he taught, the materials that he created, many, many, many years ago. So, there is going to be a time that I don't get on a Delta flight to travel a class. I think that's still several years off, but I think there'll be a period of time where I will fade out and just slowly reduce training and then go to wherever.
Well, I hope that is a ways out. We're lucky to have you in the industry. You certainly have given back to a lot of people, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor. I mean, I've been very fortunate, very blessed in many, many ways to be able to do what I've done.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony, for being with us today, and for our audience. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and the podcast. And just remember, you can, it doesn't matter whether you're a small PSAP or a big PSAP, you can go out there and you can do what you can do. and make a difference. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.